Hi everyone, Kayla here, your Millennial Therapist in the Great Pacific Northwest, owner of Reclaiming Stories Therapy. And today I'm going to talk to you about why Millennials have one of the highest rates of anxiety. So just like in my last video, I'm going to be looking kind of over this direction at some of the notes that I made to kind of keep this video going. So I'm sorry if I'm glancing down and scrolling a little bit, but I want to give you the best information that I can. Sometimes I can't hold it all in my head. So let's talk about anxiety and why millennials are feeling so anxious. All right. So what is anxiety? Let's talk about that first. Anxiety is our body's response to stress. So when we feel stressed, we tend to feel different biological symptoms like sweating, rapid heart rate, heavy breathing, maybe feeling really tired. These are all signs that our fight or flight or freeze system is in response. And when we have anxiety, it gets a little bit more grandiose. So there's kind of this constant underlying worry that can be intense and excessive, and it's about kind of everyday life things. So I tend to say that it's mostly around the unknown, that we tend to focus in the future. And it's very much, that constant worry, that constant playing the what if game. What if this happens? What if that happens? And it does take a really big toll on our mental health and our bodies. One of my old colleagues that I went to school with, she works with anxiety, and she mentioned a really good way of talking about anxiety that I really like and use now with my own clients. And this is thinking of anxiety as a ticker. So it's kind of like the ticker that is at the bottom of the screen when you're watching the news. And so it's kind of like it's always there. It's always kind of on the underlying surface of things, but you can still be doing things on top of it. You can still be, relatively functioning, but it's just kind of always there. So I really like that way of thinking about anxiety. It's just always this constant underlying worrying and underlying feeling of tension in your body. So if anxiety is left untreated, a lot of things can happen. It can make it hard to make decisions. It can make it hard to concentrate. It can make it hard to sleep or regulate emotions. It can make it hard to communicate well with your partner in relationships or even friendships or even at work. I'm going to scroll here. It can create chronic body pain. I have experienced this in my own life, and I currently do work really hard at trying to reduce my own stress and anxiety because it does tend to build up in my body. And it can lead to burnout, depression, and even into a panic disorder where you get lots of panic attacks. So it is really important to look at, am I stressed, which is still very important to work on. I kind of say that I work with both anxiety and stress because they are usually very much like this. So am I stressed? Is this just situational stress, or is this constant? Is this something that I'm constantly feeling? So why are millennials the most anxious generation? Any guesses? Life. I will say life. So our generation experiences a lot of things that other generations haven't. And I know other generations will say, well, we all have our own things that we experience in each generation. That is very true. But I think our generation and future generations, even, the Gen Zers below us, are really experiencing anxiety and depression at extreme higher rates than other generations have before. So One of the big things is that our generation has now experienced we are currently in two economic downturns that have severely impacted our ability to create wealth and to gain the amount of money that our parents' generation, or our parents, yes, our parents' generation has. So we are the first generation that is on track to not make as much wealth as our parents did. And that leads to huge financial stress and trying to figure out, what's the best direction to go? How do we make these decisions about our finances? Often leads us to making the decision to move back into our parents' houses and save and try to make better financial decisions for ourselves by taking rent or buying a home out of the equation for a while until we feel like we're ready. Myself included. If you read my bio, I am currently living with my mom. My husband and I live with my mom, so that we can do that exact thing. So that's a huge reality for a lot of us, is really having to manage our finances. We live in an age where technology is everywhere and what rules our world. So this creates a world where we are constantly on our phones, we're constantly in front of our computers, like I am right now. And it just is so pervasive that we don't tend to unplug. I mean, there's tons of stats out there of how many hours a day people are on their phones or on their screens, and the damage that it can do to our eyes and all these things. But we do it because that's how the world works. And it's created shorter attention spans and this need for instant gratification, which also leads us to feel like our productivity has to be at the level of robots, that we constantly have to be on. And again, we can just never unplug. We never can feel like we can take a break. And yet we are human and we need breaks. So it's just, everything has been leveled up to 1,000,000, and somehow we are expected to meet that need and that expectation. And, it has created this world where we are constantly in communication over technology. And so we have a lack of community around us until the current pandemic, when that's the only way that we were able to actually communicate and hopefully gain community from that. I think technology has in the past been something that has been a good way to just not be in person with somebody, not have an in-person conversation. And thus has led to a lot of people lacking friends, lacking a support system that, you can call up in a crisis, or if you need somebody to talk to, that we are all communicating over technology. So yeah, our society is a capitalist society. Time is money. So we are not living in a world that really values taking time off for yourself, taking time off to spend time with your family. And thus, we have a really hard time. I think this pandemic has shown that, it is important to have time off. It is important to be at an employer that prioritizes giving you paid time off and giving you things that are going to help in your everyday life instead of just at work. And I think we as millennials are really starting to choose those jobs. So we are starting to really push those boundaries to say this is important, because we can't sustain this. We can't sustain this high level of stress and anxiety, but that's where we are. Another big topic is the education saturation. So we are also the generation that was told, go to college and then you can get whatever job you want, and that is the path to go on. So somehow all parents had this idea, and we all went to college. And then when we came out, we were like, oh my gosh, there's so many people that are trying to get these jobs, and the competition to get a job is so high. It still is high. And a college degree is now like the equivalent of a high school degree. It's like you need it to get in the door, but it doesn't go much further than that because, of course, you don't have the experience. You have this degree, and somehow you're supposed to be getting experience and a degree at the same time, and yet that doesn't really work that way. So you have a degree but no experience, and you have to find somebody to take a chance on you to gain that experience. And it's a really hard situation to deal with. So again, stress and anxiety. Then we have the world. We have the world of divisive politics, our country, as I'm sure all of you would agree with. No matter what side you're on, I mean, we are on sides. There's a line, you are on one side or the other. There's not a lot of collaboration and really coming to any type of agreement on values and how we want to move forward as a country, that you're either on more of a liberal side or you're on more of a conservative side, and both those sides have very different beliefs and value systems now. So that's stressful. And then we have global warming that is creating things like huge storms across our country and the world, flooding, ice melting, animals dying, all those great things. And then, of course, creating things like what we're in right now, which is a global pandemic, because the Earth is warming and it's easier for these viruses to get around and to wreak havoc. So yay, that's fun to have to deal with too. On the family front, we are the first generation to grow with high rates of divorce. So we had to deal with that growing up. And now if we are starting our own families, then we have to kind of maneuver through all those challenging dynamics in our own families. If you have two different sets of parents, myself included, both my husband and I come from families that had divorced parents or separated parents. So we each have two sets of parents. So combined, we have four sets of parents. And that's a lot to juggle and a lot to think about at holidays. And that's a challenging thing for everybody in that boat to have to kind of deal with and figure out what does that look like. If you're a parent, then you are probably working no matter whether you have a partner or not. We're just kind of in a time where it's really hard for there to only be one working parent. It definitely is done, but again, our generation has a harder time doing that financially. So that puts more stress on the family too. If both parents are working, they have to juggle their work schedules, they have to juggle managing the household, they have to juggle raising the kids, and then somehow find time for themselves and to make sure that they're prioritizing their relationship. So that's a lot of family stress. And then we are also more likely to be far away from our parents too, that if you're not living at home, then you might be living, across the country. A lot of people go to college either in their hometown and then move away, or they go to college, somewhere else that is far away from home and maybe stay there. So or move around for jobs and whatnot. So there's lots of different reasons why our generation is further away from family. And again, that creates less social support and familial support that's like readily available to you. And can even add stress when looking at starting to take care of older parents. Some of us older millennials are now getting into that generation of, our parents are getting older and we have to start thinking about what does that look like in our plan to start helping take care of them. And that can be really stressful if you're really far away from family and don't know what that's going to look like or how you're going to fit that into your own family dynamic. So lots of things to be stressed about. So many of us can attest to the fact that being in your 20s and 30s, yes, it has always been challenging, but I think we experience different challenges and maybe some more challenges than previous generations. And life is quickly changing all the time. I think, life has always been changing for anybody who has ever lived, but our the way that life is is rapidly changing every year, every 5 years, every 10 years. I mean, just think about where we were 10 years ago is completely different than where we are today. So we're constantly having to change and reinvent ourselves and keep up with the times. And that's exhausting. Again, technology is pushing all this forward so rapidly that we're constantly having to adjust. And that's hard. I would say one of the biggest things are the expectations versus reality. That there are so many things that I think we were told when we were younger that our parents just didn't realize were going to be so different by the time we actually got there, that the expectations of what we went into many of our big life decisions like college, or not going to college, or thinking about relationships and what that means, again, for us kids a divorce, that's a hard thing to figure out. What does that mean? And so there's a lot of things that we were told, like, the sky's the limit, you can do whatever you want. And yet once we got there, it was like, meh, maybe not so much. Maybe we have to figure out how are we going to get through this. And I think for me, as somebody that is an idealist, I always think, oh yeah, well, I'm going to get here and it's going to be amazing. And then I get there and I'm like, I don't feel like an adult. I don't feel like I know what I'm doing. And I know that's universal. I know most adults are just like, we're just making it up as we go. But our generation really is making it up as we go, because what worked for previous generations doesn't work for us anymore. So we're constantly having to innovate and create and do new things that are going to be benefiting us better than what was there previously. That, that 9 to 5 workday doesn't really fit a lot of people's needs. And so that's why we have so many entrepreneurs and people that are really trying to figure out, how are we going to best balance life for us? So that's really the good news, is even though we are at this point where we have so many things to worry about, so many life stressors and anxieties, that we really are the generation that is pushing these boundaries, though. We are trying to create and innovate new ways to deal with it. And therapy is one of those things that our generation is a lot more okay and open about therapy and going to therapy and talking about mental health. And I think that's amazing. And that's why I want to be here to serve as a millennial therapist and give you that person that is like, I get it. I totally get it, because I'm right in it with you. But I have the skills to kind of help you walk through this as we both move through it together. And I'm going to be there with you every step of the way. So, you know, therapy is a great way to deal with this. Also, we are a lot more open to more holistic wellness of both mind and body and spirit. And most of us are, at least heard of yoga and meditation and mindfulness. Those have become such buzzwords, but it's because it's so needed, that we really need something to help us unplug and to help narrow our focus and to really just stay in the present. And that's really how I help treat anxiety, is talking about all these expectations and all the things that we want, that we feel like we're not meeting, and talking, through those things and kind of figuring out how to make life work for you, but then also learning skills on how to manage anxiety in the moment. And a lot of that is trying to just stop focusing on the what ifs in the future, but really getting back to the present. And I'll do more videos on specifics on how to decrease anxiety, but I'll just kind of leave you with that little bit of why we are such an anxious generation, and a few things of how we can start to manage that, and knowing that it is manageable. We can do this, and we're, you know, the generation that is going to do this, because we also are perfectionists and feel like, you know, we have to do everything right, even though honestly there really isn't a right or wrong. It's just figuring out what's best for you. So I will leave it there. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you like it. Last time I pointed in the wrong direction of the button to press to subscribe. So if you want to subscribe, go that way, and hit the subscribe button. If you are watching this on YouTube, my YouTube channel, the Millennial Therapist -RS, which stands for Reclaiming Stories. If you're seeing this on my website, you can find me on other social media platforms. I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Reclaiming Stories Therapy. If you are wanting to get in touch with me for therapy services, I would be more than happy to talk to you about that. So head to my website, reclaimingstoriestherapy.com, and fill out my contact form that's on my contact page. Or if you are reading one of my pages about anxiety, there's also a contact form on there as well to make it easy and accessible for you. And I will get back to you, and we can chat and see if we are a good fit to work together. So until then, take care. As always, stay safe, stay home if you can, and I will see you next time.